Hello, everyone. Welcome to the online public meeting for the Bangerter 4700 South State Environmental Study. We're going to wait just a couple of minutes before we get started with the presentation to give a few more people a chance to join the meeting, but we will get started in just a couple of minutes. Okay, perfect. Let's get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the online public meeting for the Bangerter and 4700 South State Environmental Study. My name is Laura Ingersoll, and I'm a member of the Public Involvement team and will be moderating tonight's meeting. Tonight, you're going to hear from members of our project team about the initial phases of the environmental study at this location, what we're going to be looking at throughout the entire study, and details on how you can provide us input to help inform the process. We're going to start with a presentation that will take about 20 minutes. Then we're going to use that remainder of the time to address any questions that you all have. We're going to be recording this meeting and we'll make it available tomorrow on the project website. So after we complete the presentation, like I said, we're going to go into the Q&A portion. We're going to respond to any of the questions you guys have about this project. If you want to click the Q&A button that's located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will be able to type a question. We're not going to be taking any verbal comments tonight. So if you do have a question, please type it into the Q&A box. Everyone in the meeting will be able to see the questions that have been submitted. After others have started submitting questions, you'll see a thumbs up icon next to those questions. If you have the same question and are interested in those answers, please use that like button to use the thumbs up icon to like the question. Every like will move that question up on the list. Then when we get to the Q&A portion of the meeting, we're going to start with the questions that have the most likes next to them. So I'm now going to pass the time over to Brian Allen, the UDOT project manager for this study, to start the presentation. Brian?
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Allen, and I'm the UDOT project manager overseeing the Bangerter environmental studies. My co-presenter today is Tyler Allen, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tyler Allen. I'm with UDOT Environmental, and I'm helping to oversee the Bangerter environmental studies.
I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are well acquainted with the progress that has been made on Bangerter Highway over the past 10 years. Continuing on this progress, UDOT has recently started multiple state environmental studies to evaluate converting all the remaining signalized intersections on Bangerter Highway to freeway-style interchanges. Tonight's meeting will focus on Bangerter and 4700 South. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to introduce the study and gather feedback about the overall transportation needs and environmental issues that should be considered as we move through this process. The input received during these meetings will help the team develop and refine the preferred design concept that will be available for comment later in the study process. As mentioned, a recording of tonight's meeting will be available on the study website tomorrow for anyone that may want to review it or share it with others.
The study at 4700 South and Bangerter Highway is a state environmental study, or SES as we usually say. And SES is for state-funded projects. We at UDOT, we conduct an environmental review of all of our projects, and it's just one of the types of studies that we conduct. The environmental review process for a state study provides all the decision makers with the necessary information to make the best project decisions while carefully considering what the anticipated benefits and impacts may be. This process begins with the scoping phase. That's where we are tonight. During the scoping phase, we gather information about the area. What are the resources in the area? What is the history? What is the traffic data that we may need to have? And what is the local knowledge that we may not have ourselves, but the public, might have? This helps us to establish our study goals and criteria that we will be studying. The scoping process is followed by the development of the design concept and screening metrics to determine possible solutions based on the information we find during this scoping phase. The design concepts are then screened for a variety of things. That includes the ability to meet the project goals, the impacts to the natural and built environments. That means both the world we see and as well as the human built environment. We're part of the environment, so we want to study that as well. We also look at the engineering considerations and costs, and we look at, can we build what we want with the budget that we have? Once a particular design concept goes through the screening process and is selected as the preferred design, our team will then evaluate the environmental resources within and adjacent to the impact area and look at all the design concept criteria throughout the area. At that point, the state environmental study will be drafted. And when that is drafted, we'll hold another public hearing to give the public an opportunity to review this design, offer comments on it, and any feedback that you would like us to address. We'll be able to look at the design at that point and provide responses to those comments and changes if possible. Once everything has been completed and we've met the requirements, and the state environmental study will then be finalized. Once the area is finalized, it's environmentally cleared, and we can move on to the next phase of the project, which is the design and construction. Tonight's meeting is the first of many points of contact throughout the process. And we want to hear from you throughout the process as well. But make sure to visit our website, udot.utah.gov/Bangerter4700 South, and sign up for any updates if you haven't already, to make sure that you're receiving the latest and greatest information. As always, feel free to reach out to our team at any point throughout the process. We do want to hear from you.
The purpose of this project is to improve safety and increase mobility. The current scope is to replace the traffic signals at 4700 South with a freeway-style interchange. Grades separating these facilities will reduce travel times for drivers on Bangerter and on 4700 South. In addition, it will reduce the number and severity of crashes by eliminating high-speed conflict points. It is no secret that Utah is growing. By 2050, the design year of this study and project, traffic is expected to double from the current rate of 60,000 cars per day to 120,000 vehicles per day on Bangerter Highway. Without making major improvements on Bangerter, projections have estimated that delays could increase by nearly 4 times.
This graphic shows our study area for the environmental study. This is the limits that we'll be looking at for all of the environmental resources that we will be studying for. It's important to know that this is an approximation. The areas may vary as the design progresses of this interchange. However, don't look at this and think that everything in here is going to be torn down and then built up. This isn't the area of the construction. This is the area we look at for resources. It gives you a general idea of that our team will be considering as part of this study. And as part of the process, we'll look at all the environmental resources in the area, such as noise, cultural resources, air quality, and all the cultural resources and history that we might see in this area.
This slide shows the project schedule and accompanying milestones. The orange represents project milestones and the gray public coordination milestones. But as Tyler has mentioned, and you can always get in touch with the project team through the project hotline, website, email, or even traditional mail at any time. So we are currently on the left side of this chart, conducting a public open house to better inform our concept development. Once a design has been selected, UDOT will hold neighborhood meetings to notify impacted residents and businesses and discuss the path forward. And that is currently scheduled for late August. The selected design concept will then be presented to the public for review and comment early next year at a formal public hearing. UDOT will then review and respond to public comments and may adjust the design as needed. The state environmental study process will then be complete and the project will move into contractor procurement and right-of-way acquisition. Construction for this project is scheduled to start in 2023 and typically takes a year and a half to 2 years to complete. So Bangerter is both a highway and a utility corridor. On the east side of Bangerter runs the Jordan Valley Aqueduct. This is a 66-inch diameter pipe owned by the United States Bureau of Reclamation. This water line provides water to over 1 million people in the Salt Lake Valley. On the west side runs the Kearns-Chesterfield Storm Drain, an 84-inch pipe owned by Salt Lake County Flood Control. These utilities will be considered when looking at different alternatives. If either of these utilities needs to be relocated, it could add a year to the project schedule, taking it from a year and a half to 2 years to 2.5 years to 3 years. We are still in the very early stages of this environmental study. We are hoping to hear what is important to you to help us determine what solutions make the most sense. Here are some possible interchange concepts that our team plan to investigate as we move forward with the study. The first one is a diamond interchange. Next one, single point urban interchange, also known as a SPUI. This type of interchange is the most common in urban areas and is the type of interchange that is used at other locations. We'll also be evaluating, in partnership with West Valley City and Taylorsville, if Bangerter Highway will go over or under 4700 South. However, I want to note that to date, UDOT has not been able to proceed with the under option when the aqueduct parallels Bangerter due to the increased impacts and costs associated.
So now that you've heard what we're looking for and what we're studying, please let us know what you think. We have a variety of outreach channels set up to allow you to provide feedback, and we welcome input at any point throughout our study. We do, however, have our first formal comment period open now through August 4th. What that means is that any comment received during this period will be included in the final environmental document. There will be another chance to provide a formal input later on in the study. Once we have a preferred concept and a design developed, we'll have the draft state environmental study available for review for the public, and you can provide comments on the specific design. You can call, email, visit our website, or mail in a comment form. Tell us how you use these roads. Do you walk or drive or bike in the area? We want to know about these things. We're also looking for information about potential environmental considerations that we should address with this study and project as well. We're looking for feedback so that we might know and make sure that we're looking for a solution that developed that is right for this area. Any comments submitted tonight during the Q&A are not considered formal comments. So if you wish to make a formal comment, please remember to send it in by August 4th using one of these resources we have available for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brian and Tyler, for that information. Now that we have finished with the presentation, we want to jump over to the question and answer part of this meeting. As a reminder, you should see a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. If you click on that Q&A button, you'll be able to type your questions in. If you see a question that's already posted in the Q&A that's similar to the question that you have, you can also click the thumbs up icon next to that question to like it and let us know that you also want to hear it answered. Questions with the more likes will move up the list and we'll try to answer those first. We're going to try to get through as many questions as we can tonight before the meeting ends at 7 p.m. If for some reason we're not able to get to your question tonight, you can reach out to us via that project hotline or email and we'll make sure to get you an answer. And just also, we are having an in-person public meeting tomorrow night from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Kennedy Junior High School. The same information will be presented that you saw tonight, but our study team will be there live in person to answer any questions or provide any additional information that you have. So with that, we'll get started with our Q&A. First question, let's send this over to Brian Allen. Where in the process are property owners contacted and what does that process entail? Also, typically, how long do property owners have to be out of their property? This is from Michael Higginson.
That's a very good question. So with all these Bangerter interchanges, I mean, there's always going to, unfortunately, there's always impacts to residents along the facility. At this time, we do not know what those impacts are. We're going through and developing different alternatives based on the projected traffic in 2050. Once we have a better idea of the preferred alternative or design alternative, we'll be setting up neighborhood meetings with impacted residents to inform them prior to the public hearing. At that public hearing, we'll officially present the document for approval. Right-of-way activities, which is purchasing land, cannot start until the environmental document has been complete. And that won't be complete until early next year, so 2022. So we'll be notifying impacted residents later this year, and the right-of-way process won't begin until 2022. We actually have the right-of-way lead for this project, Eric, on here. He's more familiar with that right-of-way acquisition. Eric, I was hoping you could just give a quick overview of this. I believe what did the question, how did they phrase it?
Typically, how long do property owners have to be out of their property? I assume this means if they are being acquired, what that process looks like for timeline.
Yes, if we're acquiring a property in total, the minimum requirement that we would do is 90 days. However, we always try to give the maximum time available to give owners plenty of time to relocate. There will be a relocation assistance, and if you are one of those affected property owners, then we will outline that process to you and answer any questions as we draw closer to a design and know how many properties we have to acquire and what the process will be for those, each one of those. So, by the minimum 90 days is when we will give you notice when that has to start, but we should have longer periods of time depending on the circumstance.
Great. I have kind of a follow-up right-of-way question. This is from Jonathan Figueroa. Are there any plans or intentions of removing houses from the west side of Bangerter? Brian and Eric, you want to take that one as well?
Yeah.
I think that's more Brian's.
Brian, how about it?
Thank you for the question. We are currently evaluating different alternatives, so we don't have a finalized design yet. This meeting is being held to gather information from the public to figure out what's important to help better inform the design. So we can't say if a house on the west side will be impacted right now. But as I mentioned before, later on in the process, once a design has been selected, we'll be holding neighborhood meetings to inform residents of those impacts as along with the public hearing. This schedule slide's perfect. Thank you.
Next question, are you going to be working with the local schools to better understand how students get around the area? Brian, and we also have Derek on if he wants to chime in from a design perspective at all.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a big priority of ours. We've already met with Granite School District, and we'll continue those meetings to really make sure that the safe route to schools. So each school has a junior high and elementary schools have safe designated routes. And we really work to make sure that those routes are in appropriate places and that we're coordinating with the school district. And also the city. The city plays a large role in staffing the crossing guards and things of that nature. That's a great comment, and thank you for bringing it up.
I guess kind of a follow-up question to this as well, also talking about, I guess, pedestrians and also bikes. This is from Maria. Will there be a way to cross Bangerter on foot or on bike? You want to take that one again, Brian?
Yeah, so pedestrian safety is very important. One of our goals I discussed earlier was mobility. Mobility of vehicles, but also a big consideration of that is mobility of persons, right? Bangerter is a large facility, and it's important that east-west mobility is not inhibited. So we will be looking to how to accommodate pedestrian and bicyclists. The long-range plan, I believe, is to have bikes on 4700 South. We're working with both West Valley City and Taylorsville to make sure this bridge, structure can accommodate any bike lanes that are built in the future.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Okay, this next question also comes from Jonathan Figueroa. How much width does the highway need to be expanded? I'm not sure if, Jonathan, if you want to type any clarifying questions, I'm not sure if we're referring to just that interchange or main line, but maybe you can kind of address both of those, Brian.
Yeah, so mainline Bangerter will be 3 lanes in each direction, right? We're working, as I discussed in the presentation, the design year for this project is 2050. So we design it, the off ramps and the signal to perform at 2050 traffic levels that are acceptable. We use what's called level of service, or just its delay time. So we're working on that. We're currently, we've got a whole bunch of traffic numbers, and we're Ivan Hooper with Avenue Consultants is helping the department, UDOT, build that traffic model and make those assessments.
Great. Jonathan just clarified that he's asking kind of in general, do we know how much wider it must be widened in feet or meters at this point in the study?
Not this time. It depends on how the signal's configured. I mean, you can configure a signal in a lot of different ways, and that impacts on how many different lanes, left turn lanes, for example, right turn lanes, if you have to stop at the right turn lane or if you can go right through it. So we're still looking at a whole bunch of different options.
Hey, Tyler, an environmental question coming to you for sound. Are there plans to build out / complete the sound barrier walls where they are missing on the designated area of Bangerter Highway? This is for Kenan Karalik.
That's a great question. And the answer is we are going to be looking into this. We don't know currently where sound walls may be expanded or changed or left in place. As part of the environmental process, we take before sound measurements. We run the models according to the design that is considered preferred, and then that helps us to understand where noise walls may be recommended. We have to follow the UDOT codes and standards in order to put those in, but that will be part of the next public hearing. That will be information available to you.
Just pulled up that schedule graphic. So that public hearing is going to be here in that October-November timeframe there. Kind of a similar schedule issue back to right of way as well. This is from Rick Wooten. Is that time frame different for businesses / churches that may be affected? I think he's probably referring to the difference between residential properties versus those more commercial properties that are there on the corridor.
The timeline, the minimum requirement under the federal and state laws is 90 days to give notification. Certainly with businesses, we understand the complexity of moving and we will try to give as much time as possible. And usually we plan that there's going to be a much longer lead time to accommodate that. However, with houses, we do something similar depending on the needs of the owner as well as, but the minimum, when I said 90 days, it's a minimum time frame for our federal and state regulations. And that's from after the owner has actually been received an offer. So the time doesn't begin until that time. But yes, usually with businesses, we understand it takes longer. So.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Eric. Brian, maybe this one for you. This is from Comley Wilmore. Regarding homes, which side of Bangerter do you anticipate to be the most impacted, the east side or the west side?
It's a good question, and we don't know yet. We're currently looking at the different alternatives. As we mentioned before, there's a lot of utilities. There's a lot of, we're looking to be the least impacts we can. However, we don't want to have this significant investment and not have it function well in 2050. So we're currently evaluating the different alternatives, and those impacts will be disclosed as we move through the process at a later date.
Great, thank you. This is another question from Tiny Vanderbilt. How far will the Bangerter expansion run from north to south? Ryan, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So we're looking at that. Commonly, these intersections are somewhat close. So sometimes we'll look at adding aux lanes even. That's an auxiliary lane, meaning you get on the ramp to get on the freeway and you get off. These are all different options we'll be looking at. This is the study area, and that's why it goes so far north and south, is we're looking at those improvements to add between intersections. We currently don't know if they're needed. So the study area, as Tyler mentioned, is where we're looking at different improvements. However, just because you're in the study area doesn't mean you'll be impacted or an improvement or construction will take place in that area.
Just to ask kind of a follow-up with that, maybe Tyler, you can jump in on this one. How did we determine for an environmental document the study area limits? That's from Michael Spott.
We look at these interchanges as to find logical areas where the impacts may occur. So where the construction may extend to, where noise impacts are likely, and we border the study area by that. It's not as much, these are the hard limits of how this has to be done, and that's why it's more flexible in these, as we mentioned earlier. If we find that we're not covering all the impacts, we'll expand it, our study area out to make sure that we're accounting for all impacts. But it's at this point we're estimating that boundary, and then we'll have a more final impact area when we have a design.
Perfect, thanks, Tyler. Brian, this is from Michael Spott. What is a grade separated interchange? What is the benefit of that?
So currently there's a signal at Bangerter Highway and 4700 South. So a lot of that signal time is dedicated to, allowing Bangerter to travel north and south. So when you take that conflict out of there, meaning you put Bangerter Highway at a different grade than 4700 South, you allow the signal to perform more efficiently to move east and west traffic, and you take Bangerter out of the equation. And that improves safety because vehicles are traveling fast on Bangerter Highway, right? And they're not traveling as fast on 4700 South. In addition, there's stop and go conditions on Bangerter Highway and 4700 South. So when you remove those stop and go conditions, you create a more consistent travel flow, which is benefits travel time and also benefits safety.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is from Corey Tenney. Can this go under 4700 South like you are doing further south as opposed to above? Brian, do you want to talk about this one? I'll pull up the existing utility map as well for you.
We'll be looking into what it would take to take Bangerter Highway under 4700 South. We've never been able to do that when we have this Jordan Valley Aqueduct running parallel to Bangerter. When you take a Bangerter Highway under a side street, you use a thing called soil nail walls. I mean, it's just like when you nail a wall, nail something into a board, it extends into the board. Same way when you go under, it extends a nail into the soil, which could impact that Jordan Valley Aqueduct pipe. And to relocate that is a significant investment. So we're currently looking at it, and we're working with West Valley City and Taylorsville to determine if that's feasible, both from a cost perspective and from an impact perspective. And if I didn't explain that soil nail wall thing very well, come to the open house and I can draw some pictures. That's a lot. It's one of those things. It's a lot easier to see than it is to hear.
Great, perfect. And just as a reminder, that open house will be tomorrow night from 6 to 7:30 at Kennedy Junior High School. Okay, with that, next question from Michael Higginson. With the final SES scheduled for both 4700 South and 4100 South to California Avenue at the same time, will the time frame for property acquisitions be moved up sooner for properties in that area? Do you want to talk about how those interchanges kind of work together, Brian?
Yeah. So let me reread that question.
Yeah, let me read it one more time. With the final SES scheduled for both 4700 South and 4100 South to California Avenue at the same time, well, will the time frame for property acquisitions be moved up sooner for the properties in that area? Do you want to talk maybe about where that 4100 fits into the overall Bangerter schedule?
Yeah, it's a great question. So 134 South, 9800 South, and 4700 South, those are all funded for construction in 2023. So that means that for these projects, the bulk of money goes toward construction, right, for materials and labor. But however, we will have funding in 2022 to begin right-of-way acquisition to prepare for construction in 2023. That's for 134 South, 98, and 47 South. So 41st to California, that isn't funded for construction until 2028. The state environmental study for that area we've started that. However, that is a more complex area due to close intersection spacing. We will be having a similar open house for those segments, but that will be held later on. We're currently focusing on the interchanges, as I mentioned before, that are slated for construction in 2023. And once we get a good start on that, we'll start having open houses for 41st to California. Right-of-way acquisition won't start at a later time for that segment because funding isn't available for construction until 2028, which means right-of-way acquisition could begin a year or two before the actual construction funding date of 2028, if that makes sense. It's a lot of dates I threw out there. Feel free to ask follow-up questions as needed. So.
Yeah, and if you have any specific questions about that, you can always send us an email to bangerter@utah.gov after this meeting. We can get you the answers for some of those dates on the other interchanges as well. Okay, next question is from Frank. How will this project affect installation of Google Fiber? I'm assuming there's a project for that in this area. Brian, do you want to talk about the coordination for that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there's a big part of all these projects is, the utilities that these impact. We work with those utilities to maintain service throughout the duration of the project. So if we do impact Google Fiber, we'll be ensured to coordinate with them so service is maintained throughout the duration of the project.
Perfect. We have another question. I'm actually going to send this one to Ivan. He's been doing some digging for this one. This is from Keenan, with the construction of this interchange, do we know or have an estimate of how much time might be saved when commuting east-west along 4700 South, where the congestion is the worst? Brian, obviously feel free to jump in, but Ivan, if you have some information about that time saved commuting east to west.
Your mic's not working, Ivan, or I can't hear you. It doesn't say you're muted though. Nope.
No.
I don't have specific numbers on 4700 South, but as I mentioned before, signal operations significantly improved when you remove Bangerter from the equation. There's a lot more, we call it green time. A cycle is like a pie, right? And it's a fixed pie. Only so much time can be devoted to each. We call it a movement, right? A left turn, a right turn, a through. So as you remove Bangerter and grade separate those facilities, a lot more vehicles can pass through the signal. The scope of this project is to convert Bangerter Highway from a signal to a grade, freeway style interchange. Improvements won't extend too far east and west along 4700 South. That is not the goal of the project. So just making sure that that's understood.
Evan is going to try to rejoin the meeting and hopefully get his audio working. So we will keep your question and hopefully come back to it. Next question, Brian Allen. What other locations are being studied right now? Is this the last time we can expect impacts on Bangerter?
So we're currently 4700 South, 134th South, and 98 South are all funded for construction in 2023, sorry. 41st to California is funded in 2028, and 2700 West is unfunded. However, we're completing environmental documents for all those intersections for construction at those dates I mentioned. All the documents are being prioritized based on those funding years that I mentioned.
Thank you, Brian. Next question, we'll send this one to you, Tyler Allen. This is from Keenan Karlik. How, if at all, do we expect vehicle emission levels to change at the 4700 South intersection with the construction of the interchange?
Typically what we see with interchange improvements or intersection improvements is a reduction in those emissions, mostly because there's less idle time, less time the cars are just sitting there and burning their fuel without being able to utilize the catalytic converter and movement. So as a whole, we usually look at this as a positive.
Perfect. Next question, Brian Allen. Do you want to describe the SPUI? This is from Jason Delmar. What is the SPUI you mentioned earlier? And I'll pull up that graphic we have that shows how a SPUI functions.
So a SPUI is a type of interchange. You commonly see it on freeway interchanges. It's a single point urban interchange. So urban being key, that it's in urban, densely populated areas. It's a type of signal in which all the cars are funneled to one location. Some interchanges you'll notice that will have signals east and west of the interchange. So funneling all the vehicles to one location makes the signal a lot more efficient and allows it to move a lot of vehicles in a quick and efficient manner. And this is the interchange that you see throughout Bangerter Highway. All the interchanges so far have been converted to SPUIs.
Great, thank you. The next one, maybe Eric Lang, you can jump in on this one. It's another right-of-way question. How would relocation assistance work for those who are leaving the state, if they're forced out of the state by the project? So if someone is relocating and it's out of state, what does that process look like? This is also from Jonathan Figueroa.
The specifics of that would probably be best to discuss in person, and we will have that meeting tomorrow night. If not, you can reach out to the team and we can at least get you some information. However, in general, the process doesn't change. It's we still allow the time for relocation. We assist with moving the property owner. There is some limits on the distance in which we will pay for the moving, but we will assist with that. And but the actual benefits from what we call relocation payments, which again needs to be outlined with you probably in person, would be the same. There's no difference on that part of it, nor the acquisition part. But your replacement property would have to be inspected by another Department of Transportation from another state. So, but we can get into that specifics later.
Perfect. Thank you, Eric. And again, that meeting will be tomorrow night. If you're able to come, Eric will be there, the rest of our project team as well. So if you want to get those questions answered, we'll be there from 6 to 7:30 tomorrow night. Okay, the next question, Tyler Allen, will send this one to you. How can I provide feedback to the team and what happens to my comments?
Great. If we can pull up the comment slide, that would help.
There you go.
Please provide comment. That's my first response to that. We have 4 different options here on how you would be able to respond. We have the hotline, email, the website, or regular mail. Right now, through August 4th, is our 30-day comment period. What that means is it's a formal time when you can provide comment. We will look over those comments, include them in the final environmental document, and provide responses to those. So we do encourage and we do look at every comment we receive, and we would love to be able to hear from you.
Perfect. Thank you, Tyler. Next question is coming from Chuck Fillmore. There is a lot of construction in this area. Is your team working with the city? Are they in the loop on this? Brian Allen, do you want to talk about that coordination with West Valley and Taylorsville?
Yeah, so we've been closely coordinating with each city. We've been coordinating with the city engineers, their utility department, public works, economic development, and all the different entities at each city. We have monthly meetings with them to discuss their plans and make sure we're coordinating with making sure that our projects are forward compatible with what their vision of their city is. And likewise, we're coordinating with all the utilities, school districts, and we're really trying to reach out to all the users of these facilities. Hence, we're having this meeting right here to really inform the design and make sure that we approach this in a systematic, appropriate manner.
Great. I'm going to send this next one over to Brian. Maybe Tyler, if you want to jump in as well, and I'll pull up the traffic graphic that we have. With construction on Mountain View Corridor, do we really need to upgrade Bangerter? This is from Jason Delmar.
Yeah, these projects are expensive. They represent a significant investment of taxpayer money. And we really seek to invest that in an appropriate manner where it will, the best bang for its buck. Is Ivan on here? He can really speak to this. There's currently significant congestion on Bangerter Highway. If you've ever driven by Bangerter Highway, those signals really reduce the travel time, right? So removing those signals will significantly improve travel time and safety. As this slide shows, Utah is growing. It's no secret that Utah is a great place to be. A lot of people moving here, a lot of growth on the west side. Traffic is expected to double, so current delays are expected to grow. By 2050, the study horizon for this year, the traffic is expected to double, as I mentioned, and delays are expected to increase by 4 times. Ivan, do you have much to add to that, if you can?
Yeah, hopefully, can you hear me?
Yep, we're good to go.
Working better now? All right. Yeah, so like Brian said, we're just expecting so much growth in Salt Lake County, and in particular on the west side of the valley. Really, by 2050, we need both facilities as freeways to accommodate that demand. So it's really not one or the other. It really comes down to both facilities being needed to meet those long-term demands, just due to the rapid growth we're getting, particularly on the west side of the valley.
Another traffic question, Ivan, so stay on. So I guess we'll shoot this to Brian and to Ivan, whoever wants to take this one. This is a follow-up from Jason Delmar. What is being done to look at the east-west connection? Bangerter handles north and south, but are you looking at east and west too?
Yes, so UDOT, we are a state agency. We work very close with the cities to ensure that government's working for the people. The project is focused on Bangerter Highway and 47th South. The project, we're really looking to ensure that the signal that will be placed here will operate at we call it an acceptable level of service, which measures the time that a person waits at a signal. This project does not expand very far east or west of Bangerter Highway and 4700 South. We are, as mentioned before, working with the cities to ensure that this project is forward compatible with any vision that they have. We've talked a lot with West Valley City and Taylorsville. And in the long range, there's a thing called a regional transportation plan, shows some bike lanes on this facility. And we're making sure that we accommodate those that nothing we build will prohibit the construction of those.
Ivan, anything you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I would add that even though Bangerter in particular in this location is really a kind of a north-south project, by removing the existing intersection on Bangerter, we're really providing substantial benefit in the east-west direction. I'm sure you all know that live out there that there's a lot of east-west congestion on 47th now. With all the other Bangerter interchange projects that have been built, that congestion has virtually disappeared, east-west congestion. We expect the same to happen here. So we do expect to see substantial east-west travel benefits, even though this is a north-south project. And we see similar things with Mountain View and other major north-south projects. Additionally, Brian mentioned the regional transportation plan. That plan does include east-west projects as well. No east-west freeways at this time, but road widening and things like that. So it's all part of an overall regional plan for mobility in the region that I guess you can learn more about at www.wfrc.org. Yeah, so there are plans for regional plans for growth that include east-west and north-south improvements.
Thanks for that additional info, Ivan. Another question from Jason. When can we expect to see the chosen design for 47th? And I'll pull that schedule back up, Brian, if you want to talk to that.
So we'll be showing the design for this early next year when we finalize the state environmental study. We'll be presenting the final design for public comment, as Tyler mentioned through the presentation, where the public will be able to comment on the design. UDOT will review those, make any changes if necessary, and finalize the state environmental study. And then it'll move to contractor procurement and construction in 2023.
Great, thank you. And a follow-up question from Jason as well. Do you want to talk about what makes 47th a higher priority than the other West Valley locations? Brian, do you want to talk about why this one and the other two are kind of on the fast track?
Yeah, so we have 41st to California is its own project funded for 2028. Those intersections are closer spaced, so it makes the traditional approach of converting an intersection to an interchange, a freeway style interchange, more difficult because the ramps will impact one another. So that project has to be looked at as a whole, as opposed to an interchange being converted to an intersection. And that's why that represents a much higher cost, and that's been funded for a later year.
Great, thank you. So the next one is from L. Ryan, we'll send this one to you, and they have kind of a follow-up question that I'll ask after that. Why didn't this happen in 2011 when they put in the CFIs?
As I mentioned before, these projects are expensive. I mean, I was honestly, I didn't work on those CFIs, but my opinion would be funding limitations. These projects are 70 million. They run as high as that. So, I mean, it would have been nice to do it all at once. However, we don't have all the money to do everything that we want all at once.
Perfect. The next question, kind of similar. This one's from Jonathan Figueroa, and I think Ivan's going to jump on and give some context to this as well. He says, I've only lived in Utah for about 15 years, but I have friends that stated that Bangerter should have been a freeway from its inception. Jason Delmar brought out a good point. You also have Mountain View Corridor, and that was also not built as a freeway. If you have enough foresight to double traffic in 2050, why was that not done freeway style from the get-go?
Yeah, so Mountain View Corridor, and I'm not as familiar with Mountain View Corridor because I haven't worked on that facility as much. However, that is being built with the frontage roads, with a freeway that can be built in the center at a later time when funding is available. So Mountain View Corridor was built with that forward, with that vision in mind. Ivan, do you have anything, or anyone else have anything to add to that? That's a very good point.
I'll just add, you're exactly right, Brian. Ultimately, Bangerter ideally would have been built as a freeway originally, but as has been mentioned several times, funding just did not allow that. I feel like we've collectively learned from that experience. And like Brian said, Mountain View Corridor has been designed to be a freeway all along, to be built in phases as funding allows. So that's why if you're on Mountain View, you've got that huge median in the middle is where the freeway will go. So yeah, hopefully even though we don't have enough money to build it all at once, we are planning for that in the future on Mountain View, and that'll be a easier process than it has been with Bangerter.
And actually, Mountain View Corridor has a really cool GIS map that shows you what's built now and what's built in the future. It has I do this because it has a little slider thing that's pretty kind of fun to go back and forth. So I'd encourage you to just Google UDOT Mountain View Corridor, and you can see what the future plans are for that facility.
Perfect. Next question is going to be about construction. Brian, or if Marwan wants to jump in, will east-west access on 4700 South be closed while it's under construction? Do you want to just talk kind of in general about construction impacts for this type of a project? Brian, if you want to start, and Marwan, if you're still on, if you want to jump in at all.
Yeah, construction is always impactful, right? I mean, lanes are typically narrowed. It's really difficult to keep traffic moving and build a road at the same time, right? Closures, it depends on the scope of the project. As I mentioned before, it would be really difficult to take this under due to the number of utilities in the area. Those east and west closures are typically done only when an intersection is taken below an accompanying side street. However, some intermittent closure should be expected if Bangerter does go over 47th, but nothing like a 6-month, 8-month closure of the east and west through movements if Bangerter goes over 4700 South.
Great, thank you. Next question is, will this all be funded by the state?
Yes, this is all funded through state funds.
Another construction question, Brian. When do we expect construction to begin on these interchanges?
So you can expect right-of-way acquisition to begin 2022 with construction beginning in 2023. If an aqueduct has to be relocated, that's typically the first item of work that will be done. If it does not, then we'll move right into forward with construction.
Okay. Well, kind of a follow-up question to that. Jonathan says, I noticed that all of this funding is being done with state dollars. Is there no federal funding available? And this is going to be our last question, and then we'll wrap up the presentation, the Q&A portion of the presentation.
No, that's we typically use our funding, federal funding, for different projects. Federal funding comes with different regulations that can make projects more have a lot more overhead and costly. So Utah is very progressive in that it really funds transportation well. And this is being funded with all state dollars to move the project forward in an expedited manner.
Okay, perfect. All right, we're at 6:56, so we're going to wrap up the Q&A portion of this meeting. I'll share my screen again. So thank you everyone who joined this call for the Bangerter Highway and 4700 South State Environmental Study online public meeting. We really appreciate you taking the time to join, give us your feedback, ask your questions. As Tyler mentioned in his presentation, we are in that 30-day formal comment period. So if you did ask questions or comments tonight, those aren't considered formal comments. So if you do want to make a formal comment, please submit it to this email here, bangerter@utah.gov, or mail us to this address that you see on your screen by August 4th. And also don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time during this project via email or the project hotline if you have any questions or concerns. A copy of this meeting will be posted on the study website tomorrow if you want to rewatch any portions of it, or if you want to share it with any of your family or friends or neighbors. And this is to Elle. I know we didn't address your question, but we are holding an in-person public open house tomorrow night. Elle had asked if we attended tonight, do we need to attend tomorrow? We are going to be having the same information at that meeting. So same presentation will be there on display boards. But if you have additional questions or you want to meet the project team or get any additional answers, we would love for you to join us. It's going to be at Kennedy Junior High School from 6 to 7:30 p.m. So we will be there tomorrow night if you do have those additional questions. So thank you again all for joining us. Reach out to us if you need any additional information, and have a great night. Thank you.